What if a single decision made thousands of miles away could freeze the entire global economy? That's not a scene from a science fiction movie. It's what is just unfolded. The year 2025 has reached a turning point. Beijing has rewritten the rules of the game, sending shockwaves across the planet. From now on, any company that uses Chinese rare earth elements to produce the world's most advanced microchips, those measuring 14 nanometers or smaller, must seek direct authorization from Beijing for each case individually. Whether it's ASML in the Netherlands, TSMC in Taiwan, or Intel and Nvidia in the United States, no one, absolutely no one, is exempt. Make no mistake, this isn't a minor regulatory tweak. It's a geopolitical earthquake, a tremor powerful enough to rattle the very foundation of the global economy. The Chinese decree has triggered an immediate shock across Europe, Asia, and America. The world's top chip designers suddenly find themselves operating under the implicit authority of Beijing. Washington's response came swiftly and fiercely. The U.S. Special Committee on China called the move a true act of economic warfare, accusing Beijing of weaponizing critical minerals to dominate supply chains and weaken American industry. But is this really a declaration of war? Some analysts offer a more nuanced view. Justin Hoga, professor at Cambridge University, points out a certain irony. The United States seems to struggle when other nations begin using the same tactics it once pioneered. In essence, Beijing is merely treating Washington the way Washington has long treated Beijing. This marks the new normal in U.S.-China relations. As one researcher summarized, China has simply equipped itself with tools to strike back, to remind the world of its bargaining power, to stand its ground, and to hit where it hurts most, all while leaving the door slightly open for negotiation. To understand how we reached this moment, we must rewind to 2022. Back then, Washington imposed sweeping restrictions on the export of advanced semiconductors. Giants like ASML, Nvidia, and TSMC were suddenly forbidden from selling their cutting-edge technology to Chinese clients. The official reason? National security. But behind the scenes, the real objective was crystal clear: to slow China's rapid technological ascent. China learned its lesson. Never again depend on the United States for vital technologies. As Henry Kissinger once said, America has no permanent friends or enemies, only interests. Faced with that reality, China doubled down on building its own supply chain, accelerating domestic innovation and production. Meanwhile, the technological gap between the two superpowers has narrowed dramatically. A few years ago, Eric Schmidt, the former CEO of Google, proudly claimed that the U.S. held a 3-year lead over China in artificial intelligence, calling that gap an eternity. Yet only 3 years later, China's semiconductor industry has advanced at exponential speed, rapidly eroding the American advantage. Listen to Jensen Huang, the CEO of Nvidia. Our competitor is hungry, inventive, fast, and barely regulated. People said they'd never build AI chips. That was absurd. People said China couldn't manufacture. If there's one thing they know how to do, it's manufacturing. They said they'd be years behind. I'd say they're nanoseconds behind. We're in a fight. The message couldn't be clearer. The race is tighter than ever, and now Beijing has taken the conflict to the next level, targeting the spot where America is most vulnerable. Shortly after the rare earth announcement, China retaliated with new port tariffs specifically aimed at American ships, a move that stunned the U.S. media. Headlines screamed provocation, but few mentioned that Washington had done the same first, imposing identical charges on Chinese vessels. The outcome was immediate. These fees raised consumer prices across the U.S., cut deeply into the profits of shipping companies, and put further pressure on an already fragile economy. For years, American administrations had launched trade offensives against multiple countries. But while it's easy to strong-arm Canada or Mexico, trying the same with China is another story entirely. After 3 years of enduring U.S. restrictions, Beijing has now struck back, and its leverage is far greater. Why? Because while Washington targeted specific corporations, China is going after the entire global supply network. Rare earth elements form the backbone of the modern world. They're found everywhere, in microchips, electric vehicles, wind turbines, defense systems, and especially in data centers that drive artificial intelligence. You can replace a chip manufacturer, but you can't substitute an entire ecosystem of essential materials. The numbers speak volumes. Since 1995, China has dominated rare earth extraction. By 2010, it controlled nearly all refining operations, and its output has continued to rise by almost 10% every year. But the biggest difference lies elsewhere. Whereas U.S. sanctions were blunt and aggressive, China's new strategy is precise, lawful, and almost impossible to challenge through the WTO. Beijing isn't banning exports outright, it's demanding government approval for each shipment individually. That distinction changes everything. It gives Beijing the ability to tighten or loosen supply depending on the political climate, rewarding allies while putting pressure on rivals. For the first time, it's Beijing, not Washington, that is writing the rules of global trade. So what exactly is China targeting? The list is both strategic and surgical. Ultra-hard materials, vital for high-precision industries. Processing equipment for rare earths, ensuring other nations can't replicate China's refining capacity. Heavy rare earths used in lasers, sensors, and defense technologies. Lithium batteries, the bloodline of the electric vehicle revolution. And finally, the technical know-how behind it all, to block any transfer of skills or expertise abroad. Why does this alarm Washington so much? Because, as one researcher from the Foundation for American Innovation warned, if China enforces these measures strictly, it could shut down the U.S. artificial intelligence boom entirely, plunging the nation into a deep economic downturn. On paper, the American economy still looks strong, but beneath the surface lies a frightening fragility, a crisis waiting to erupt. Warning signs are already flashing. The Trump administration boasts about a 2025 S&P 500 increase of 11%, a seemingly healthy figure. But that growth is an illusion. Over one-third of the index's value comes from just 7 tech giants, the so-called Magnificent Seven. Their success hinges almost entirely on artificial intelligence-driven expansion.
Nvidia is up 32%, Google by 25%, and Meta by 17% since the start of the year. Impressive until you dig deeper. A Harvard economist recently calculated that if you subtract the enormous investments made in AI data centers, the real economic growth of the US for the first half of 2025 collapses to just 0.1%. Yes, you read that right, 0.1%. In other words, artificial intelligence isn't just a booming sector, it's the life support system keeping the entire US economy breathing. It's what's holding everything up. Now imagine what happens next. If Beijing tightens access to rare earths, to equipment, and to high-end technologies, the shockwave won't just strike a handful of tech giants, it could unplug the engine driving the world's largest economy. As global corporations and governments wrestle for dominance, another quieter revolution is unfolding across financial markets. The Wall Street Journal has given it a name, the debasement trade, or in plain English, the devaluation bet. This movement reflects a massive shift in investor psychology. More and more players are losing faith in traditional currencies like the US dollar, and with good reason. Inflation remains stubbornly high, public debt has reached historic levels, and even central banks, the supposed guardians of monetary stability, are diversifying their reserves. They're moving away from the dollar, purchasing record amounts of gold and digital assets like cryptocurrencies. The message behind this shift couldn't be clearer. Investors are searching for refuge, for assets that governments cannot print at will. Two clear winners are emerging: gold, the timeless store of value, and Bitcoin, increasingly seen as a scarce, decentralized digital reserve. Traditional fiat currencies, by contrast, are bearing the full weight of this flight to safety. This isn't a passing trend, it's a deep systemic signal, a reflection of growing anxiety that the AI-fueled economic boom might be nothing more than a house of cards. And if that engine stalls under the pressure of China's new export rules, investors will need a safety net. For a rising number of people, that safety comes in the form of limited supply assets, stores of value they hope can soften the impact of a US growth crisis and a broader loss of faith in money itself. We've reached the end of this analysis, and one thing is unmistakably clear: the phase we're entering is entirely unprecedented. By imposing its control over the use of rare earth elements in advanced semiconductor production, Beijing is no longer merely responding to US sanctions, it is redesigning the rules of the global economic game. China's true strength doesn't lie solely in technology itself, but in the foundation beneath it, the material supply chain, that invisible framework powering everything: semiconductors, green energy, defense industries, and above all, the infrastructure of artificial intelligence. The strategic contrast between the two superpowers is striking. Where Washington has focused its attacks on individual companies, Beijing is targeting the entire ecosystem that sustains them. And it's doing so with a subtle legal mechanism, one capable of rewarding allies while restraining rivals. In this new environment, the technological gap between the two nations continues to shrink before our eyes, and the dependence of the US economy on AI-driven growth has become its greatest vulnerability, its Achilles heel. The turning point is right in front of us. There are two possible paths ahead. The first path is one of confrontation. If access to critical materials and industrial know-how becomes restricted, the resulting shockwave could paralyze America's economic engine, shaking its foundations and triggering a global recession. The second path is negotiation, a potential agreement that could limit the damage on both sides, stabilize the critical supply chains, and prevent the situation from spiraling into an uncontrollable trade war. One thing is certain: through its command over rare earth resources, China now possesses a lever of extraordinary power. The responsibility now falls to the United States to acknowledge this new balance of forces and to seek a compromise before tensions reach a breaking point. The face-off between the two giants is entering its most intense phase yet, and the final stakes go far beyond their rivalry. What's truly at risk is whether the global economy as we know it can continue to function, or whether this new geopolitical fault line will rewrite the future of trade, technology, and power itself. So, what do you think about all this? Do you believe China's latest move marks a new economic era, or just another chapter in the US-China rivalry? And more importantly, how do you think this shift will affect the future of global technology and artificial intelligence? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your opinions, analyses, and predictions down in the comments. Let's start a real conversation together. Thank you so much for watching this video until the end, and for your attention and loyalty to the channel. Your support means a lot, and helps keep this kind of independent analysis alive. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of the upcoming episodes. And of course, feel free to share your opinion in the comments. Your perspective always adds real value to the discussion. Until next time, see you very soon for more videos just like this one, exploring the real forces shaping our world.